Good morning, Year 5. I hope you're all well. Today is lesson 9 and we are looking at fraction sequences. In this lesson, we're going to be learning about how to count up and down in a given fraction. To be able to solve these problems, you're going to have to use knowledge that you've gained over the past few weeks. That includes converting from improper to mixed number fractions and vice versa, and also how to find equivalent fractions. Today, at certain points, I'm going to ask you to pause the video and I will present you with a question, and then you'll try and answer it independently before starting the video again. So let's start today with some very easy and simple fraction sequences. So first of all, we could count in quarters. So quite often we begin at 0, and a good idea is to actually draw a number line. It will really help you. And if you're counting in quarters, it's simply 0, 1 quarter, and remember the denominator doesn't change. 2 quarters, it's only the numerator that changes. 3 quarters, and here we reach, and if we said 4 quarters, we need to use our knowledge of equivalent fractions, and we need to know that 4 quarters is equal to 1 whole, so it becomes 1. And then after 1, we begin again. The whole process begins again. It's 1 and 1 quarter. 1 and 2 quarters. And so it carries on. You don't have to start these fraction sequences from 0. You can start them actually anywhere. So for example, you could be counting in fifths. And in this case, you could start at 2 and 2 fifths. Once again, I would draw my number line, and then you're counting up in fifths. So our first jump will take us to 2 and 3 fifths. Next jump will take us to 2 and 4 fifths. Next jump would take us to 2 and 5 fifths, but we know 5 fifths equals a whole, so it's adding 1 whole to the original whole number. So it's 2 add 1 is 3. And then we start the whole process again. It goes 3 and 1 fifth, and then we carry on. I'd now like you to pause the video and complete the following problem, doing jumps of 1/6, taking yourself from 3 and 2/6 up to 4 and 1/6. Hopefully when you were completing this problem, you saw that when you were jumping up in 6, starting at 3 and 2/6, you have your first jump, which takes you to 3 whole numbers and 3/6. You do your next jump, which takes you to 3 whole numbers and 4/6. Do another jump, which takes you to 3 whole numbers and 5/6. Another jump, which takes you to 3 whole numbers and 6/6. You recognize that 6/6 is equal to 1 whole, so you convert that to 1 whole. It's then 3 plus 1 more whole, which equals 4. And then as you're only adding on 1/6, that will take you to 4 and 1/6. If you got that right, well done. So as well as simple jumps, such as jumping in quarters or thirds, you can also do bigger jumps. So for example, in this one, I'm going to jump in jumps of 3/10 each time. So if I start off with at 1, I draw my number line, my blank one, and then I add on 3/10. Remember, this is going to be 3 jumps, and the whole part is split into 10 parts until we get to our first whole number. So if I do 1, 2, 3 jumps, well, this would be 1/10, this would be 2/10, and then this will be 1 and 3/10. And then begin the process again. I've got 3 jumps. This will be 1 and 4/10, 1 and 5/10, 1 and 6/10. I know this is 6/10 because if I have 3/10 plus 3/10 becomes 6/10. Start the process again. 1, 2, 3. 1 and 7/10, 1 and 8/10, 1 and 9/10. Now this is where it gets a little bit trickier, because when we jump now, we actually do 3 jumps, but the first one we come to is 1 and 10/10. We know that 10/10 is equal to 1 whole, so we add our new 1 whole to our original one, which gives us 2. Then it goes from 2 to 2 and 1/10, and then 2 and 2/10. And then the pattern continues on. To show your understanding, I'd like you to solve this problem. I want you to do jumps of 2/5, starting at 2 and 1/5, and you should eventually end up at 3 and 2/5. Pause the video here. So when solving this, you should have been doing jumps of 2/5. So you begin at 2 and 1/5, and you do 2 jumps, 1, 2. This will take you to from 2 and 1/5 to 2 and 2/5, and then 2 and 3/5. That's your first jump, 2/5. Then you're going to do another 2 jumps. So it goes from 2 and 3/5 to 2 and 4/5, 2 and 5/5. We know 5/5 is equal to 1, so that becomes 3. Then another 2 jumps, 3 and 1/5, and eventually to 3 and 2/5. If you got that right, well done, congratulations. So as well as going forwards, these number sequences can also go backwards. So a nice simple one would be jumping in quarters backwards. So we would draw a number line, excuse me, it's not straight. And then we could start at, say, for example, 2 and 3/4. And then we start to jump back. Remember, we are taking off this time 1/4 each time because the number should be getting smaller. So we jump back 1 jump. So 3 take away 1 will become 2 and 2/4. You jump back again, becomes 2 and 1/4. Jump back again. Now there's no quarters, so it's 2 wholes. We jump back again. We now actually bridge through 2, and we're going into 1 and 3/4. If you get confused here, just remember that the whole number, if it's quarters, would be 4/4. So at 4/4 take away 1/4 will be 3/4. And the process just continues to 1 and 2/4. You can also have much bigger jumps as well. So in this case, I'm going to jump back 2/5 at a time. I'm starting this time from 4 and 3/5. So just remember, I'm jumping back 2 jumps each time. So I jump back, in fact, you can even count back. So it goes 4 and 3/5 to 4 and 2/5. Go back again, 4 and 1/5. I've got to jump back again. So it goes from 4 and 1/5 to just 4 this time because I no longer have any fifths, but I still need to do a second jump. I've bridged through 4, so it becomes 3 and 4/5. The pattern then continues, 3 and 4/5, take off 3 and 3/5, and then 3 and 2/5. For your next independent task, I'd like you to solve this problem, counting backwards in jumps of 1/5, starting at 4 and 3/5 until eventually you reach 3 and 2/5. Pause the video here. So when counting back in fifths on this problem, I'm hoping that you were taking off 1/5 each time because the number will be getting smaller again. So 4 and 3/5, you take off 1/5 becomes 4 and 2/5. Jump back again, 4 and 1/5. If you jump back again, we have no fifths now, so we have a whole number. Jump back again, we're bridging through the 4, and we're now going to have 3 and 4/5. Jump back again, 3 and 3/5, and then that would leave a final jump to 3 and 2/5. If you got that right, well done. Another type of fraction sequence is where you have a missing number. So in this particular problem, you have to look at you notice that the denominator is quarters here. And then you need to work out actually what are the intervals, how big are the jumps each time. Here you can see that the jumps are 1/4. So if you start at 1/4 and then you jump up another quarter, that will take you to 2/4, and you're able to complete the missing number problem. Sometimes the jumps can be even larger. In this case, we can see it goes from 2/5 up to 1 3/5, but the jumps aren't going up in fifths, so we need to work out how big the jumps are. So I can start, and I can use a blank number line to help me. If I start at 2/5, and I'm going to initially start counting up just in fifths because it's the easiest way of doing it, and all the denominators are fifths. So 2/5 becomes 3/5, and then another jump which becomes 4/5. And I'm going to keep going. 5/5, which we know is a whole, 1, another 1, and 1/5. Now we can see we've actually got two of the numbers that are on there. Do another jump, that'll be 1 2/5, and do my final jump of 1 3/5. If I look at this now, I can say, well, when I look at these two numbers which I've already got, I can work out how big the jumps are. So going from 1 1/5 to 1 3/5, from here to here, I can see I've got 1 2. So if I go back, I should have to do 2 jumps to get to this number, either going backwards or forwards from 2/5. I'm going to go from 2/5 in this case, 1 2, and I can see that my answer will be 4/5. So I can complete my grid. I'd like you now to try and solve this independently. Try and find out what the missing numbers are. You can once again draw your blank number line to help you. If you wish, pause the video now and find out what is our missing fraction. Hopefully when solving this, you have discovered that the jumps are actually 2/6 each time. So we've gone from 3/6 up to 5/6. And then the next jump will be jumping 2 more on. So if we start at 5/6, and then we do 2 jumps, it goes 5 6 6 6, which we know is a whole. So that's 1, and then from 1 up to 1 1/6, and that will be our answer. And then if we're correct, and we want to double check, it should 2 more jumps should take us to 1 3/6. Which goes from 1 1/6 to 1 2/6, and yep, 1 3/6. So we're definitely correct. Well done for getting that right. One final way of looking at fraction sequences is where we don't have a common denominator and we need to find one. In this case, we want to put them in the correct order. We're starting at the smallest and working our way up to the largest. We have a half, 3/10, 6/10, and 9/10. Now at the moment, we do not have one common denominator, so we need to find a common denominator. In this case, I am going to multiply up my halves into tenths. So to do that, I need to look at my denominator, my half, and think about how many times does 2 go into 10. Using my knowledge of times tables, I know that 2 goes into 10 5 times. So if I write out below 1/2, and I'm now going to be multiplying it by 5, so that my 2 becomes 10 for my denominator, and I need to do the same with my numerator. 1 times 5 is 5/10. So I now know that 1/2 is equal to 5/10, and I can use this now to help organize my fraction sequence. Remember, I'm starting with the smallest up to the largest. I know that 3/10 is smaller than 5/10, so if I'm going to begin, I will begin with 3/10. I then, if I want, I can put a line through it. I then know that 1/2, which is equal to 5/10, is smaller than 6/10, so that will be next, 1/2. I then know that 6/10 is next in line, and finally, I have 9/10. So I've used my knowledge of equivalent fractions and finding the common denominator to help me put these fractions into a sequence. I'd like you now to have a go at trying to solve this problem independently. Remember, you need to find the common denominator for all the fractions and then put them into order, starting at the smallest up to the biggest fraction. Pause the video here. Hopefully when you were looking at this, you would have recognized that the simplest solution is to turn 3/6 into 12ths. So you look at your denominator and you need to know how many times 6 goes into 12. Using your times tables, you should recognize that 6 goes into 12 twice. So you write out 3/6 and you need to multiply it by 2 to get to 12 for your denominator. And you do the same for your numerator, times it by 2. 3 times 2 is 6. So we have 6/12. We can now put them into order. So we begin with, remember, we're starting with the smallest. 4/12 is the smallest. 6/12 or 3/6 will be next. 8/12 will be next. And last but not least, 10/12. Well done if you got that right. For today's lesson, I would like you to scroll down to the bottom of the page where you will find some challenge questions. Challenge 1 are the easiest of the questions, so if you're not confident with these, then please try those first. Challenge 3 is the hardest. You are more than welcome to try all 3 of the challenges, but if you wish to just try one that you are comfortable with, then please do that. If you really want to push yourself today, then I have put some deepening questions on a PowerPoint. All of the answers are available at the bottom of the page as well. Best of luck today. See you tomorrow.